We are back with another D&D OGL 1.1 related topic. At the end of our video from last month, we talked about a silver lining, and that is that there's kind of people picking up the flag and running down the field to kind of pick up where D&D ruined everything. And a lot of that has gone they pulled back a lot of the OGL 1.1. Things are calm on the D&D camp, but there's a few people like Paizo is doing the Orc license. MCDM is putting out their custom setting. And earlier this week, we got our first little update from Kobold Press's Black Flag Project. Black Flag Project.
Black Flag Project.
So yeah, what we want to talk about is just like what this first packet released, maybe what we can expect, and kind of our first thoughts. And today, or what was it, yesterday, so on the 13th, I believe, we got the first kind of little preview of what they're calling Playtest Packet 1. Mm-hmm. It's I believe, 12-page document, pretty short, just covering kind of the very basics. And if you've been following our videos for 1D&D, this is very similar. They're going to release kind of little packets every month or so, kind of sneaking what we can start play testing, kind of give them feedback. I will say, compared to what we've gotten with 1D&D, this does seem a lot smaller. And it is just the first one, and they might be trying to rush it out because there might be some of the enthusiasm being drained because D&D pulled back so much.
Yeah.
But let's just kind of take a look, and then I can kind of tell you what I'm thinking. A little sneak peek. I'm a little bit bummed out, to be honest. I'm hoping people can go into the comments and maybe convince me why I'm crazy, or maybe you can convince me why I should be a little bit more excited.
I would love to convince you.
But I think on our last video we recorded for the OGL 1.1, this was like one of the big things I was looking forward to. I love Kobold Press. They only make quality stuff. So I'm not going to say this is bad, but it's definitely not what I was hoping for.
Okay.
So they started off with just like, what is this? What is role-playing? All this. And I guess like my first little sticky point already, they call it a core fantasy system. And for me, there's a very distinct difference between what a setting is and what a system is. Sure. I have a Lord of the Rings 5e setting, that allows us to play D&D in the Middle-earth setting.
Yeah.
If they call it a system, I expect it to be a totally different game.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I would think that if you buy a game for PlayStation 5 and try to put it into your Xbox One, they're not going to work because it's a different system.
Right. But because of the OGL 1.1 and them really launching this in a reaction to that, I expected it to be a standalone, a way for me to escape 5e. And it's obviously not, because immediately after, right in this first couple paragraphs, we talk about how it's compatible with 5e material and it's going to be built off 5e. So I'm already kind of just like starting to curb my enthusiasm a little bit and try to figure out like where this is going to fit in with my gaming table. So we get this kind of, what is it? What is role playing? What I will say, one of the big things that kind of gets brought up with D&D is that they don't explain things enough. Sometimes there's like descriptions that leaves a little bit of confusion. They have done a really good job of coming in here and just making sure like all the questions can be answered within one document. But with that, we are introduced to the average D20 system we're all used to. It's saying that there's going to be a Monster Vault book related to this and the Game Master Guide. So there's going to be 2 books that we need instead of the 3. So what they talk about is very similar to D&D. And my core issue with D&D is that Dungeons & Dragons is trying to be like the game for everybody. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't make sense, because a game for everybody has to be so kind of middle of the road that it doesn't do anything amazing, but it tries to not do anything bad.
Yeah.
I have behind me the Star Wars role-playing game, and they like use totally different dice. Like they swung for it. They're like, we know our setting. We know that this like pull from good and evil. We're going to build a setting around that. And this kind of just falls into like, anyone can play it. Just go have fun with our generic fantasy world.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Once we get down to here, this character creation, things get even more to me, because what we see is it's identical. They're just reproducing what's already in the D&D book, almost word for word in most cases. So things like, and you've played a lot of D&D, so you're familiar with like proficiency bonuses. Like you understand all these terms because it's exactly the same. So the one thing that they changed that I think is actually a plus is we have this choose a lineage and heritage. This is what they're calling race. D&D, or 1D&D, just announced that they're changing race to species, which a lot of people are like, that's not better, it's just different.
Yeah. What are they doing differently with that?
It's just like stepping away from problematic language.
Okay.
So instead of calling them races, because in humans you have multiple races depending on where they're from, a
Right.
dragonborn isn't a race, right? It's a totally separate thing.
Okay.
So this lineage and heritage is trying to tackle that of just how do we in 2023 tackle issues of race in a better way. And I think rather than calling it species, which sounds more sci-fi alien to me, heritage and lineage makes sense.
Okay. Do you and so this is an area in which you are on board with the change up.
Yeah, it will affect how we play Zero,
Yeah.
uh, but it's
Actual game effect is 0, but you at least can understand the slight difference and attempt at being better.
yeah,
Yeah.
and just listening to the crowd at general and being like,
Mhm.
how do we react to what people want? And I think they did it. And then you get your choose a background and fill in the blanks. Real standard stuff. So if we keep scrolling down, we get down to page 6. So gaining levels. Again, this whole XP thing, 1 to 20, is identical number to what's in the player's handbook. I re-looked that up. Age, size, speed, all these are exactly the same. I mean, almost word for word, if not word
Yeah.
for word in every instance. The elements of a heritage kind of just explains why they're going to that. One thing that one D&D that did was really cool was they took away most of the kind of ability score modifiers from the race or what's now species and put it into your background, because really it's not like who you're born to, but like what you've experienced that makes you who you are.
Yeah.
And they're going to do the same thing in this. It's copying a lot of what one D&D is doing. It's sad, like we don't know if Kobold was doing this before one D&D, but one D&D came first, so we're just going to keep comparing it to that.
Yeah, I mean that's the sad reality, right? Like whoever
Yeah.
comes to market first, that's what you are aligning it against. That's just the reality of the time frame. And it could be a thing that they can lean on as a crutch to say, well, we did some of these things beforehand, but like at the same time, they've had how long you said they've been in development of this for the last year?
They've said, yeah, over a year now.
So they've had opportunities to adjust things, but I would argue it seems, at least at this point in the conversation, a marketing strategy to lean into 5e because people are comfortable with what they know.
Yeah. So if we keep going down, we see they've introduced a few. They got humans, dwarves, elves, kind of the basic core races. And I mean, we're going to go through alpha then a little bit more specifics, but for the most part, word for word, just the dwarf from D&D. What they change was like fire forge heritage and stone heritage. These are different than like the hill and mountain dwarves in traditional D&D.
Okay.
So it's cool. They're putting little kind of tweaks on it and little sparks. And that's like the forge craft, you're resistant to fire damage. That's a new thing we don't see in dwarves. Reforge, kind of showing like you get glass blowing or metal work in here. Stone heritage is more about like the mining. So
Mhm.
which one are you, a maker or a miner?
I like that. I like that delineation.
And I would too. I think it's a really cool approach. Except the one thing one D&D did to me, and they said this in a video, was they're trying to make the dwarfiest dwarf. In the materials in 1D&D, which are also building off of 5e, similar to this,
Right.
I think crushed it way more.
Really?
Like it feels like a dwarf who's like walking like on stone and can feel the earth tremble because he's had such a connection with the stone, and they're hardy and they feel completely separate than humans. Where this, I mean, it feels good. Like it's cool. We lose a lot of the Faerun and kind of the D&D world storytelling, and this is a little bit more generic right now. I
Yeah.
am sure they're going to pull in their materials as we go.
You would hope. Otherwise, then what's the point of in
Yeah.
your own world if it's not really your own world?
But if we go down to the elf, and this is the example I kind of prepared. So you have age, lives up to around 750 years. You have 5 to 6 foot tall, 30 walking speed, and then night vision. Right here, you have 5 to 6 feet tall, 30 feet, 750 years, like 100%. The only thing that's different is they just give it dark vision, and they say dark vision within range. Here, they call it night vision, and they're just writing what dark vision is.
Yeah, it still says within 60 feet.
It's identically the same, yeah.
They have elongated the definition and changed the word.
Yeah, and another place we can kind of see that here, this magic ancestry. So keen senses is the same, trance is the same, but longer because they have to explain what all these long rests are.
Mhm.
But magic ancestry, word for word, is the same with what D&D calls Fey ancestry.
Mhm.
Now there is a reason. So up until about 2-3 weeks ago, I think my timeline might be a little blurry. I believe Fae was not considered part of the open gaming license or the SRD.
Okay, so they weren't allowed to. That was
But
like
in the latest SRD, Fae is now available.
okay.
It is rumored that it was accidentally added. Like they were rushing out the new SRD and it got swept in with a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have this, and then again, you have cloud heritage, which are like people up in these towers and mountains. It's very cool, very evocative. You have the grove heritage, which so you have like the trees, very similar. And we just did our Lord of the Rings watch through, so you could say like those Rivendell mountain elves versus the ones you see in the trees, right? You have these two very distinct. So it's cool. Then you have the human, again, exactly the same thing. Ambitious is a little bit different, but really we are striking like a 95% success rate and being identical to what we already have. Then you have the nomadic heritage and the cosmopolitan, which is cool. Humans, you had kind of human, you had variant human. So to have kind of two more distinct story kind of telling aspects is interesting. It'd be interesting, like, so nomadic heritage, there's like a nomadic background in D&D. So it's interesting to start using this verbiage and kind of not related to backgrounds, which is coming up soon.
Okay.
But I'm sure that'll be fine. It's just like a cool idea.
How they delineate the difference between a background and a heritage.
Right.
Is background more personal and heritage is just where your people group or your family
is from
line is from? Like, is that how they're aligning those things? Because
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say like your heritage is going to be like where you, in real life, where you and your family come from, maybe some of those traditions you brought in, but most of your skills are going to come from like where you went to school, what your friend group were like, and that could change depending on where you move from where you started.
Yeah.
So you have cosmopolitan. So you have kind of like your kind of stalky, rangery, doesn't live with people. Then you've got your city dweller, cool, kind of generic again, but we'll see. Maybe they'll build upon those. And then we get our backgrounds, and these feel very similar to what 1D&D is doing now. So that's the kind of cool thing. Again, we don't know, but like skill proficiencies come with the backgrounds, very similar to 1D&D. But again, like if we look at this, if we take Scholar, I brought up another one. So this comes out of the Sword Coast Adventure Guide. So you have skill proficiency in history plus one of the three here. You've got 2 languages, and you've got like a whole bunch of tools. And if you come back to here, I mean, it's near identical. The only difference is they don't give you history, but you're able to select 2. So you could select history and one of the other ones.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, we're like, it's almost identical to the materials we already have. This gets a little bit more like legally weird to me because this website is like very legal gray zone. None of this is in the OGL because it's like the extra materials that aren't open to everybody.
Yeah, these are campaign specific, right? Like these came out when a campaign came out.
Yeah. So the fact that Kobold Press is kind of riffing off of that material feels a little strange. And I would give them the benefit of the doubt if Scholar and Cloistered Scholar were just like a similar name. But the fact that like these skill proficiencies and everything are so close, they're obviously looking at it.
Yeah.
Just feels a little strange.
Yeah.
Then you get your motivations and stuff. It's kind of cool. Just like, what does it feel like to be a scholar? We have soldier backgrounds already, so very similar again. And then you have magic talent. So it's just like, so talents and magic talents. These are what I would summarize as feats. And out of all the stuff Kobold Press came out with, these do seem the most kind of creative. There's some new ones in here. Combat casting is related to a few, but it feels kind of new. Like the idea of you're using a sword as your magic casting item or spell focus item.
Okay. Is that not something that you can currently do in D&D?
I mean, if you're playing with me, you can.
But in the core structure of the game, you can't use a weapon as a...
It's usually a relic of some sort or a necklace, right?
All right.
So what you see a lot are like in homebrew campaigns being like, I got a shield. I'm going to like install my relic into the shield and make my whole shield.
Gotcha.
So this is just saying like, hey man,
the weapon or the defense mechanism is a carrier for something else that carries that.
Yes, okay. Usually. It's kind of cool. I'm trying not to rag on them too much for this because this does seem like where they're attempting to build a world of their own.
Yeah, you're giving it A for effort in this situation.
Yeah, so you got like hand-to-hand school specialization. This gets a little weird, and we went into details about this in one of our 1D&D videos. It might have been the very first one.
I think it was.
D&D is removing this kind of idea of schools to do like these three specializations. And I can't remember. I should have prepared this off, but I can't remember. So three different groups. So this feels weird if D&D is going to moving everything very soon to one D&D, and this idea of schools stuff is just stays with kind of like this old 5e rule set. Kobold Press is building materials that feel like they're going to be dated once they finally release.
Yeah, but they're backwards compatible.
Which they should just said just compatible. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
compatible.
exactly. Yeah, otherwise it just sounds like it. That's a fancier word that's also being misappropriated, but a fancier word for antiquated.
So yeah, so one kind of cool thing. So you have like they're grouping their feats. That's something D&D I don't believe has done. They're now grouping their feats by level, which is cool, and they haven't started doing that here at all. But you have martial talents, technical talents, and before up here we saw magic talents and just like talent as a group.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Like, do I want magic talents? Do I want my guy to feel more like an engineer? And I go into like these technical talents maybe, or just like more of a schooled person. So that's an interesting idea of like how do we use feats to build upon our backgrounds a little bit more. But so far in this 12-page document, I think it'd be safe to say like 10 or 11 of these pages are coming straight out of the SRD with very little changes other than omissions. And I don't understand what Kobold Press is trying to accomplish here, other than just building a setting you can play in your 5e campaign.
So answer this question for me. Do you think, like, if you had to whittle down your biggest beef with this whole release, what would you say is a 1 or 2 point argument for why you are underwhelmed by this?
Yeah, I think my biggest complaint what was affecting me the most while looking at this was I wanted a new system. I wanted a game that felt different than D&D. D&D does a great job doing what it does, but I'm interested in something different. And all this is doing is rewrapping what we already have.
Okay. So that's your one. Is there a secondary to that, or is that like
No, I think that's the big thing, and that a lot of us have been waiting for this release because a lot of us love Kobold Press. I love everything they make. This is not bad. It's just not special, right? So I think we got to delineate, and this is also the first packet of many. But I think if anyone had the power to make a system that revolutionized this hobby, it could have been Kobold Press.
So I think that you wanted me to call you crazy or
Yeah.
convince you otherwise. I'm not going to be able to, because if what we've been waiting for, and I say we very liberally,
Yeah.
what we've been waiting for, what the community like you have been waiting for is what you just said. But you've been waiting over a year for this thing to release that would be an alternative to what you are immersed in, and you, as a lover of D&D, also, like you said, want a break from the system. You want a break from that so you can do something new, so you can try something new, so you can explore new things. And if this, after, yes, you're saying this is their first packet of many,
Right.
but if this is their first packet, you would assume that they would be putting their best foot forward to get people excited about this new venture. And if what you're saying is true, that you look at the data would suggest that 95% or more of it is just a direct rip from D&D's open gaming stuff, then if that's their best foot forward, you should have every reason to feel let down for what to expect after this.
And what I'm hoping people get to this point in the video and they're like writing a paragraph in our comments being like, you're missing the point.
Here's what you're missing. Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm missing the point. Because one D&D,
you're an optimist. It's important for everyone to know who's watching this. You are an optimist, so you don't come to everything with this sensibility to you.
If you've watched my one D&D videos, like compared to others, I'm stoked on it. Like I think everything they're doing, that first packet where it's like, hey, here's all our new races, including a new race and all of our edited races. I was like, this is wild. Like the backgrounds are so cool, and this feels less than that.
I do know that there are other systems that are out there. One that I own that I've never played, and you've looked through the material, is City of Mist. Is a very different RPG system. What are some of the other ones that are out there that currently exist that are in contention for maybe a valuable alternative to 5e.
Yeah, so you've got Paizo's Pathfinder, which is known as like 3.5 D&D because they kind of took those old rules and rebuilt it.
Okay.
Um, there's
But
another
even still,
system.
that's still built off of
Yeah.
D&D as
Then there's Blades in the Dark, which is like a heist system. So your team does heists, and they built rules around that to make it really engaging.
okay.
I have a game called 12 Candles where you light 12 candles on a table, and as you're going through time, you put candles out. And the idea is like all of your characters will die by the end. It's about what you do with your life before then.
It's bleak. Okay.
Super bleak. But again, because they knew what they were doing, they could build a system that went all in. So all the rules are built on that. But Dungeon World is another one that's a mass use system. The issue with a lot of these is I'm very nerdy. A lot of these systems are too nerdy for me. They also yeah, and they also require a higher level of like emotional connection and being able to like vamp off each other. So if you guys aren't going into it from like a drama club that's playing RPGs, they require a lot more than just rolling dice. A lot of their systems are based off of interactions between players, not just dice rolls.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So for like
That is what's like City of Mist. Even though I haven't played, I've read through the structure, and that is what it feels like. It is much more play acting and much more
yeah,
diving into this world of make believe and interacting with one another in that front, as opposed to okay, you walked into this room, roll for initiative, right? Like it's okay, what do you do, and it's a bit more open ended and
yeah.
less on rails.
There's one more system that I should at least mention, and to be forthcoming, they gave me a book for free. So not sponsored, but there is a connection there, and it's called
Yeah.
Quest. Quest is a really cool rules. I would say rules light, but it's not really less rules. They're just easier to understand. Like building a character is a little bit more simple, but there's still like a rule structure to play the game. So it's not just kind of play acting. Like there's rules. It's just a simpler, easier game to play.
Did we do that? Did we do a version of that?
We might have. Zach Wilkinson's like a really big fan of it, so he's run it for me a couple times. I don't know if we did or not. I can't remember.
There was a game I played with someone where everything the what was sent out, the character sheets were much more simplified. It was a lot more plug and play, a lot
Yeah.
less a lot less of the kind of the getting up to speed.
Right.
Carrier Adventure was a lot easier.
Yeah, and that's really cool for a lot of like I think I'm past that stage in my life. But if I had kids or if I was new to the hobby, like that's a really good way. Because D&D, I think D&D is very easy to play. But if I were to read that book alone, like I'd be freaked out. It's like 700 pages of material.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's like what I've been thinking about Black Flag. I don't know. I'm not giving up. We'll probably do one of these videos every month because they've kind of promised us that that's going to be their release schedule. I'm not giving up because I know the company, and the company just makes good material. This might have been a very weak first entry to me. So maybe more than anything, just like as far as marketing strategy, maybe this was a mistake. But I'm sure they will come up with really cool things down the road that I'm hoping are less one-to-one D&D.
But to be clear, from your perspective, they have nowhere to go but up for you.
Yeah, because something I've talked with Patrick a bit about, and maybe you, I don't mind failure as long as you're trying something new.
Sure. Yeah, and
So-
I think that's the beauty of a person who does creative work as an
Yeah.
industry.
Well, and that's one D&D. Their rules, a lot of them have been failures to me. Like I've hated what they've done with like critical stuff, but they're letting us play test it, and you and I have play tested it with Lauren and Patrick, I believe. And there were things that just weren't cool, like that we didn't like, and we can tell them. I've been filling out their forms every time, like, and we've seen rules adapt every month. So
That's good.
I'm sure Black Flag and Kobold Press will do the same thing.
Having an agile community or an agile system that is built around the community who actually is spending the time investing in it is kind of crucial to this whole hobby. Otherwise, it's just another publisher writing something for other people to read and either like or not like. The community aspect of it and the ability of the producers to actually adapt and be flexible within the feedback from that is what makes it a game and is
Yeah.
what makes it enjoyable and what makes people stick around. But right now, what I'm hearing from you is there's not enough happening for you to jump ship off of 5e because this feels just like a
It is
repackaging.
5e.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
what
MCDM
happened?
MCDM has their in their closed off Patreon, they're kind of showing in development like what it's like to build a game. I'm not going to kind of cover any of that until they start making things public. But when they do, we'll make videos about it because I think what they do, people will either hate or love because it's going to be like that big of a wild swing. So we'll keep updating you on Black Flag. Hopefully, we'll be able to start showing some MCDM stuff still, and maybe we'll start playing D&D on our streams again.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
I don't care about any of how the sausage is made. I just want to play the damn game.
I do. I haven't played D&D in a while, so we should try to get that on the calendar.
I am so ready to do dice rolling with you again, my friend.